Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to picture something for a second. Think about, the last time you were watching a trailer for a massive new sci-fi movie in a dark theater.
Oh, yeah, with the massive sound systems.
Exactly right. Or maybe you were right in the middle of this incredibly tense, epic boss fight in a video game. You know that music playing in the background?
The kind that gives you instant chills.
Yes, that massive, sweeping, almost otherworldly sound that makes everything feel huge. Well, what if I told you that the secret of DNA powering that exact feeling you got actually comes directly from 1970s hard rock?
It is quite a cognitive leap to make, isn't it? Going from vintage vinyl records and, stacks of guitar amplifiers to modern algorithmic cinematic soundtracks.
Sounds totally unrelated.
Right, but the lineage isn't just some vague inspiration. It is incredibly direct. And more importantly, it is mathematically measurable.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going to uncover the secret, mystical DNA of 1970s hard rock and discover how this decades-old music is secretly powering the modern cinematic soundtracks and the AI-generated music you listen to today.
It's a fantastic topic.
It really is. And our primary source for this exploration is this brilliant column from Monumental Movement Records, or MMR. It's titled The Intersection of Hard Rock and Eastern Philosophy Mysticism.
What makes this research so compelling is how it challenges the standard historical narrative. I mean, it forces us to look past the leather jackets and the volume.
The typical rock star mythology.
Exactly. To look past all that and instead examine the actual architectural framework of the songs themselves. Because the mechanics of what they were doing were incredibly sophisticated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can talk about how this music is training artificial intelligence today, we need to set a baseline. We really need to define what hard rock actually is.
Right. Establish the ground rules.
Yeah, because I know I am totally guilty of just lumping all loud guitar music from the 70s and 80s into one big bucket. Like, it's all just heavy metal to me.
It's a very common misconception. But there's a very hard line drawn here, specifically between hard rock and heavy metal. To the casual listener, they might sound like siblings because of the distortion in the volume, but their core intentions are vastly different.
How so?
Well, heavy metal is primarily focused on pure speed and aggressive riffs. It operates like an assault of sound.
Yeah.
But hard rock is fundamentally different. It is deeply rooted in a bluesy groove.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's an extension of blues rock, holding onto that core rock and roll swing, the syncopation, and the feel of human movement.
Right, so it has that swagger to it. It makes you want to move your hips, whereas metal makes you want to, I don't know, punch a wall.
That's a pretty accurate way to describe the physical reaction, yeah.
But here is the massive contradiction that really drives our deep dive today. The true defining characteristic of 70s hard rock isn't just the blues groove. It's this incredibly unlikely fusion.
Yes, the fusion is key.
On one hand, you have this very Western macho physical power. It's loud, it's aggressive, it's visceral. But then they took that physical power and slammed it right into Eastern philosophy and mysticism.
What's fascinating here is how deliberate that collision was and why it works so well.
Yeah.
You really have to look at the psychology of the era.
Setting the scene.
Right. These artists were coming out of the late 1960s, a period heavily focused on peace, love, and Eastern spirituality. As the 70s arrived, the culture wanted something harder.
Something with more edge.
Exactly, more edge. But they didn't want to lose that search for deeper meaning. So they intentionally created a hybrid. They weren't just playing rebellious music, they were taking contrasting global cultures and weaving them together to create otherworldly experiences for the listener.
The research talks about how they brought in these highly meditative sounds right alongside mystical symbols. We're talking about imagery of dragons, fire, the stark contrast between light and dark.
It was very theatrical.
Yeah, it wasn't just about releasing physical energy in a crowded arena. It was really about encouraging the listener to explore the spiritual world.
Exactly. It was an invitation to a psychological landscape.
Yeah.
When you combine the visceral punch of a Western blues rhythm with the contemplative, deeply symbolic nature of Eastern philosophy, you stop just entertaining an audience.
You take them somewhere else.
You start transporting them, yes.
Yeah.
You engage both their physical body through the rhythm and their mind through the atmosphere.
It just feels like such a paradox. I was reading through this and trying to visualize it. And the best way I can describe it is think of Western blues as the foundation of a house.
Okay, I like that.
It's sturdy, it's predictable, it's built on right angles and heavy lumber. But then these rock bands kept that foundation and built an elaborate Eastern temple right on top of it.
That's a great analogy.
Like a massive, imposing bodybuilder who is practicing deep, silent meditation. Just two totally contrasting visuals. But that brings up a really huge question for me, and I want to bounce this off you.
Sure, go ahead.
Was this mystical angle just an aesthetic choice? Like, was it just cool artwork for album covers, or did it actually change the structural foundation of the music itself?
That is the pivotal question. And if we look at the historical record and the musical analysis, it becomes undeniably clear that this was not a surface-level aesthetic. It was deeply structural. And the most famous example we have to prove this structural shift is Led Zeppelin, specifically the work of their guitarist, Jimmy Page.
Oh man, this is where the story turns from a standard music history lesson into something that feels like an actual supernatural thriller.
The reality of it is quite intense. Jimmy Page was not merely a rock guitarist. He was profoundly invested in the occult and early 20th century mysticism.
He wasn't messing around.
Not at all. His primary focus was on the teachings of a highly controversial magician and philosopher named Aleister Crowley.
And we have to be clear here for you listening. This isn't just a rumor. This isn't an urban legend that fans made up in a parking lot. Page didn't just casually read a paperback about magic.
No, he went all in.
He actually purchased Crowley's former estate in Scotland, a place called Boleskine House. I mean, he bought a notorious occultist's house just so he could immerse himself in studying his rituals and philosophies.
It is total immersion. And that immersion bled directly into the mechanics of Led Zeppelin's music. Just look at Stairway to Heaven.
Probably the biggest rock song ever.
Arguably, yes. It is one of the most famous rock songs in history. But you look past the acoustic intro and the soaring vocals, the song is packed with religious and mystical symbols.
Not just in the lyrics, though.
Right, more than just the lyrics. The song's actual structure, moving from a quiet, almost folk-like beginning, slowly building tension, and culminating in a massive cathartic release. That is explicitly designed to take the listener on a literal psychological journey to the spiritual world.
I get the aesthetic appeal of singing about spiritual journeys, but how does buying a haunted house actually change the way a guy physically plays a guitar on stage?
Well, it changes the approach to the live performance entirely.
Because the research says Page would go into these massive trance-like guitar improvisations during live shows.
Yes, and he was utilizing a technique that dates back centuries in various mystical traditions. By employing heavy repetition, extreme volume, and breaking away from traditional, predictable song structures.
Just totally overloading the senses.
Exactly. He was intentionally overloading the sensory inputs of the audience. These weren't just musicians showing off how fast they could play scales. The improvisations were purposefully crafted to induce a meditative, almost hypnotic state in the audience.
Oh.
He was using the electric guitar and massive amplifiers as tools for a communal mystical ritual.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay.
I hear all this about Crowley, the haunted house, the rituals, the sensory overload. But wait, you look at the 1970s. You had guys like Alice Cooper. You had Kiss. Wasn't a lot of this just early shock rock marketing?
That's a fair point to raise.
Like, wasn't it just a way for a rock band to look edgy, dangerous, and mysterious to teenagers so they would buy records to scare their parents?
It is a very logical assumption to make, especially when we look at it through the lens of how the modern music industry manufactures personas today. However, the analysis shuts that theory down completely.
It does.
It makes it unequivocally clear. Occultism was not a hobby, and it certainly was not a marketing gimmick for Page. It was the operating system upon which Led Zeppelin functioned.
That's wild.
It dictated the specific chord progressions he chose, the dynamic shifts between light and acoustic versus dark and heavy. It dictated the thematic arcs of the albums.
So it was baked into the DNA.
Absolutely. It was the fundamental base of his entire musical expression, not a costume he put on for the press.
Wow. Okay, so Zeppelin proved you could fundamentally change the conceptual mindset and the atmosphere of the music. But the deep dive shifts gears here.
Yes, it moves into the actual theory.
Right, because if Zeppelin used the occult as their conceptual foundation, another branch of hard rock realized that to truly transport the listener, you couldn't just change the concept. You had to mathematically change the actual notes themselves.
And that brings us to Deep Purple, and later, a band called Rainbow.
Yes.
And this is where we transition from Western occultism to the structural architecture of the East. The key figure here is the guitarist Ritchie Blackmore.
An absolute legend.
Deep Purple already had a strong, aggressive foundation in classical music and blues. But Blackmore began injecting something entirely foreign into that mix, fundamentally altering the math of the music.
Right, he started bringing in Eastern scales, specifically things like Indian ragas and unique pentatonic scales.
Which completely changed the flavor of the music.
Yeah, suddenly right in the middle of a heavy, driving rock song, you would get these exotic Arabic-sounding melodies. But for someone listening who might not be a music theory expert, what does that actually mean? What makes an Indian raga different from a standard blues scale?
It comes down to the actual intervals between the notes. In standard Western music, we are accustomed to the 12-tone scale.
Like a piano.
Exactly. Think of the clean, evenly spaced keys on a piano. It marches up and down predictably. But an Indian raga operates differently. It utilizes microtones.
Microtones.
These are the notes between the notes on a piano. When Blackmore bends a guitar string to hit a microtone, it sounds slightly off or unresolved to Western ears.
It creates this tension.
Yes, instant psychological tension. He wasn't just playing different notes, he was utilizing an entirely different mathematical vocabulary to trigger a feeling of vastness, mystery, and the exotic.
That makes so much sense. It's like he created a sonic teleportation device.
That's a good way to put it.
With one standard, chunky blues riff, you're tapping your foot in a smoky club in London. But then he bends that string, hits that microtone from a raga, and instantly your brain feels a tension that transports you right into the middle of an ancient Eastern bazaar.
And the research notes that this experimentation totally peaked when he formed the band Rainbow.
Particularly on this one massive track called Stargazer.
Oh, Stargazer is a monumental piece of work because it synthesizes all these elements perfectly. It does not merely function as a rock song with a catchy chorus.
Oh, no, not at all.
It functions structurally like a grand myth or an epic poem.
Because he completely abandons that standard verse-chorus structure. He takes those Eastern microtonal scales, but then layers on a massive symphony orchestra and pairs it with deeply mystical lyrics about wizards and building towers to the stars.
It was incredibly ambitious.
And they didn't stop at the studio recording. When they played this live, they built a complete sensory environment. They were using elaborate fire and light shows.
Which was revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, just to give audiences a completely immersive experience.
By actively introducing these Eastern philosophical elements, the microtonal scales and the sensory overload of the live shows, they weren't just playing rock music anymore. They had successfully created a completely new musical language for epicness.
So what does this all mean for us today? That is the question I really want to dig into.
Modern connection.
Right. Are we just doing a cool music history lesson right now about guys in the 70s? Because as much as I love talking about Ritchie Blackmore hitting microtones, the research takes this to a place I absolutely did not see coming.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we realize that this specific blend of symbols, Eastern scales, and heavy amplification didn't just stay trapped on vinyl records in the 1970s.
It escaped the decade.
Because they had effectively created a mathematical formula for what sounds epic and mystical, Silicon Valley realized they could digitize it. It transcended the rock genre entirely and became a foundational tool for modern media.
This blew my mind. Those specific mystical chord progressions and the Eastern scales mapped out by Zeppelin and Rainbow, they are now the exact blueprints being used today for modern cinematic soundtrack production.
Yes.
And even wilder for AI music generation.
It is the ultimate evolution of their experiments. The musical traits of 70s hard rock, the tension of the raga, the release of the massive chord, the atmospheric textures are providing the exact data sets for today's technology.
The research gives us some really specific modern applications for this, too. Let's go back to that video game boss fight I mentioned at the start.
It's Dragon Landing.
Yeah, you're playing a massive fantasy game, the dragon lands, and this heavy, driving, exotic music kicks in. That is explicitly Eastern metal sounds being utilized for game background music. Because developers know that specific mathematical tension is perfect for triggering a combat adrenaline rush.
And we see it everywhere in film marketing as well. Consider the modern movie trailer. You frequently hear those massive, vibrating, mystical drone sounds.
Oh, the deep hum.
Exactly. A drone is essentially a continuous underlying note that holds steady while the melody shifts over it, creating a deep sense of suspense and grandeur. That technique was heavily pioneered in the psychedelic and mystical rock of the 70s.
And now it is standard operating procedure for Hollywood to create tension.
Yes. And then there's the AI aspect.
Mm.
Cinematic AI-generated soundtracks are driving so many modern sci-fi and fantasy projects right now.
And they are doing it by studying what hard rock did 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I just have to marvel at the sheer contrast of this.
It's quite the juxtaposition.
You take Aleister Crowley's occult rituals, you take Ritchie Blackmore's ancient Indian microtones, and you feed all of that raw, spiritual human expression into a modern Silicon Valley supercomputer.
Fascinating.
Is it incredibly ironic that the most spiritual and mystical era of rock is now the exact data being used to train cold artificial intelligence?
This raises an important question about how artificial intelligence actually functions at its core. AI doesn't have a soul. It doesn't intuitively know what mysterious, powerful, or epic sounds like.
They can't feel it.
It doesn't feel the chills you feel. AI processes audio waveforms. It analyzes thousands of songs and mathematically measures the exact millisecond delay between notes. It recognizes that a specific frequency interval, like the microtone in a raga, reliably triggers a tension response in human listeners.
Oh, that explains the mechanism perfectly. So AI needs rules. It needs a map to generate emotion.
Exactly. By feeding the neural networks, the pentatonic scales, the drones, the specific structural buildups of a song like Stargazer or Stairway to Heaven, the AI is mathematically learning how to replicate that very specific human sense of mysticism.
They did the groundwork.
The hard rock pioneers did the emotional math decades ago through trial and error and spiritual exploration. Now the AI is just running their calculations at lightning speed to score the future of entertainment.
That is just incredible to think about. To wrap this all up for you listening, we started by looking at hard rock as just a loud, aggressive genre of music. But when you look at the mechanics, that script gets completely flipped.
Totally inverted.
Hard rock was never just about volume or machismo. It was this highly deliberate structural phenomenon that successfully fused the physical power of Western blues with the mathematical tension and philosophy of Eastern mysticism.
It was a unique era where artists acted as sonic explorers. They charted new psychological territories for their listeners.
And they used ancient musical scales and the occult as their compass.
And they mapped that territory so precisely that their coordinates are still being used today.
So the next time you get chills during an epic video game boss fight, or the hairs stand up on your arm during a sweeping, tension-filled movie trailer, remember, you are actually hearing the digitized echoes of 1970s occult rock.
The past is actively and mathematically scoring the future.
It really is. And that leaves us with one final thought I want you to mull over on your own today. Think about this. If a modern AI algorithm can successfully study the waveforms of a 1970s rock song, map its tension, and perfectly recreate its mystical feelings to give you goosebumps today, does that mean musical magic was always just a mathematical formula waiting to be discovered? Or is the AI simply mimicking a human soul it can never truly possess?